Tonight, insurrection on campus. Columbia looks like the Capitol on January 6th. Why the school won't protect its own students. And where are the adults? How terrorist wannabes paralyzed America's most famous colleges.
The janitors are saying that they weren't allowed to leave.
I think that that's a really false narrative.
No Jews need apply.
I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them.
You're shoving me. All right. I will stop shoving you.
Ruin your whole life. Oh, sorry. Very visceral feeling in me when somebody tells me to go back to the gas chambers.
More, please. Ukraine just got $61 billion from us taxpayers. And they're already saying it's not enough. When do we finally say enough is enough? And gagged.
This gag order is not only unique, it's totally unconstitutional.
The judge in the Trump case fines and threatens the former president with jail time.
Somebody just told me they've never sat for such a long period of time in a courthouse.
While Trump now complains about racism in America in reverse.
And how dare you? There's no anti-white issue here.
Will Donald Trump ever get out of his own way? We start with breaking news, 7 p.m. in New York City. Anti-Israel protesters have taken over what is known as Hamilton Hall at Columbia, and they say they're not done yet. They now threaten to take over and disrupt the school's graduation ceremonies unless their many demands are met. An Intifada banner hangs from the windows now of Columbia. For those who don't know, Intifada is not a call for peace or ceasefire. It's a call for a violent uprising against Jews. The university threatened to expel the students, but that would require enforcing its own rules, which so far the university has not. It would also require arresting some of these students. Reportedly, the school has told the NYPD to stand down after last night's break-in. Of course, it's not just at Columbia. In the past 24 hours, protests escalated at UCLA in California, as well as the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, University of Texas at Austin, and others. Welcome to the Ferris Show on television. First tonight, people are about to get hurt, likely hurt badly. Already, groups of students are blocking Jewish kids from getting to class. Last night at Columbia, the terrorist wannabes roughed up a few kids who dared stand in their way. Today, the protesters, if you want to call them that, held a press conference in front of the building they took over to demand, and we quote, humanitarian aid.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students.
It seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building. Now would you please bring us food and water?
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
That is Johanna King-Sulsky. She's a PhD candidate currently studying romantic literature and poetry through a Marxist lens. That's who Columbia University is now bowing to and negotiating with. We have Victor Davis Hanson with us tonight to help us understand the big picture here, along with students at Columbia and George Washington in D.C. who've been attacked in the protests. But we start with NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer live from Columbia. All right, a couple of hours ago, we heard that threat from the university that they would expel students who were holed up in the building who broke in. Has the university either followed through with that, or have the students seemed in any way concerned by that threat?
The threat seems to be falling on deaf ears, Leland. I mean, you can see behind me, the protests have not slowed down all afternoon. We have been out here all day long, and this is what we have been seeing. Groups of people outside the gates of Columbia University with signs cheering. Beyond the gates, there are people in an encampment, and then beyond that encampment, as you mentioned, there are people who have taken over one of the buildings on campus. NYPD is out here. We've seen them over the last several hours bringing out extra extra barricades, potentially preparing for another long night here on the campus of Columbia University. Moments ago, we heard a press conference from some New York officials, including the mayor of New York City, saying that they have real cause for concern, saying that many of the people here at these demonstrations are not even affiliated with the university. They called them professional agitators, saying that they have seen through pictures and videos some, again, real cause for concern. Individuals in black attire, cameras, destroyed furniture being used as barricades, even de-arresting tactics being encouraged. So far, nothing has really changed, it seems, in those conversations between university officials and members of this encampment and this occupation here at Columbia University. So far, officials with the university only threatening to expel students and really urging them to stop the encampment by May 15th. That is graduation day, when about 15,000 students and their families are expected here on campus. Leland?
Yeah, 2 weeks away. It could be a long 2 weeks. Brooke, we understand that there's a few thousand, perhaps more people from around New York now converging on Columbia. There's video from around there. Just give us a sense, I don't know if your cameraman can zoom out, but give us a sense, the people behind you, are they on campus or they're off campus? We know that reporters have been banned from campus. Just give us a sense of where these groups of people are going to come from.
Okay, so for the most part, we've seen people, I mean, really from everywhere, Leland. They've been sort of walking all around. Over that way is Broadway. There have been a lot of police and a lot of activity over on Broadway as well, of course, a major street here in New York City. For the most part, the media and everybody is being kept across the street. There are barricades right next to us, also trying to control the crowd as well. You talked about media being kept off campus. Typically, we had expected today to be allowed to go on campus between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern. That's typically the window they allow media to go on campus. Today, though, they said they suspended that because of safety reasons. The campus right now pretty much in a way on lockdown. The only people allowed on campus are people that have a Columbia University ID or a specific group of personnel allowed on campus. Otherwise, the campus, in a sense, shut down.
Okay, well, I guess it's shut down in theory, but explain to me this, Brooke, real quick. How is it that you've got professional agitators allegedly among this group, and we're supposed to sort of absolve the students of any responsibility because of that, and yet we're told the campus is locked down and they're able to keep reporters out, but not able to keep the professional agitators out? I'm confused.
Well, look, Columbia University, a private university, right now it is up to university officials to call in the police and to help with this situation. So NYPD continuing to say that they are ready and on standby. We can see them out here in full force. They've got barricades, they've got drones. They have tons of officers out here, Leland, ready to help de-escalate this situation. But until the university says, come on in, they can't do that.
No? And that's what we wait for. It is a private university. They get to make their own rules.
Right.
Brooke Schaefer, thanks very much. Keep your shot up. We're going to come back to you through the hour. More protesters show up.
Sure.
With us now, George Washington University student Sabrina Soffer and Skylar Saradsky. We also have Columbia student Liam Shore with us. Liam, I can't imagine a Jewish student wanting to be anywhere around campus. Have you been told or promised any kind of protection from these mobs?
So no, but also, so I live on off-campus housing. So actually, I was told only people allowed in campus today are students that live in one of the 7 dorms. So I am not allowed on my own campus. I'm not allowed to go to dining halls. I'm not allowed to go to libraries. But there's no specific protection for Jewish students. The only information we are getting are these generic emails that are being sent university-wide to everyone, including the students inside the encampment and now in Hamilton Hall. So no, we are not getting specific protection.
How is it that they're able to keep you off campus, right? But allegedly all these quote-unquote professional agitators and everybody else have gotten on campus?
Yeah, it's absolutely insane that these people are on campus. And I find it even more insane that these students went inside Hamilton Hamilton Hall. The university did absolutely nothing, did not call in the NYPD. These students have trespassed, vandalized, broke windows, as you saw, and they're just in Hamilton Hall, and Manoush Shafiq has done nothing. This is almost a full day that this has been going on, and absolutely nothing has been done. It's really, really scary.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sabrina Schuyler here in D.C., you all go to GW, which is the university where there was a sign that said final solution on it, right, that had the Israeli flag and the Palestinian flag on it, reference to the Holocaust. What's it been like for you on campus? Is the university providing you any kind of protection?
I think I can speak on this a little bit. The university sent out a school-wide email saying that professors had the option to move classes online in the buildings immediately surrounding the university yard, or what we call U-Yard. Faculty does have the opportunity to request a room change, but other than that, there's been no additional measures that the university has taken.
Sabrina, we've been told for so long that silence is violence. There's a need to create safe spaces and the like. What about the faculty in this case? Have they been helpful in trying to protect you guys and speak for your safety?
Absolutely not, and I'm really happy you're bringing this up because faculty really is the root of the issue. There's an Institute of Middle East Studies at the Elliott School of International Affairs where they're holding conferences teaching decolonizing knowledge production for resistance practices, quote, end quote. And then I'm seeing on Instagram, on SJP's Instagram, these knowledge for resistance practices as pushing and shoving people. This is what our professors are teaching our students, and it is no surprise that they are out there in the encampments and staging riots not unlike January 6th. And this is the same thing that we're seeing in Nazi Germany. It is the intellectualization, moralization, legalization, and ultimately the normalization of anti-Semitism, and it is ridiculous.
Yeah, anti-Semitism, I feel like, was a few weeks ago. This is sort of passed into a calling, really, for violence and far more active measures, I guess you could say. Sabrina Schuyler, thank you very much. Liam, thank you as well. We're going to follow you guys in your trials and tribulations. It takes a lot of courage to speak out about this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Victor Davis Hanson, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institute, is with us now. I heard the reference to January 6th, and we'll put the video side by side. I think the most interesting thing is what makes the January 6th video different than what happened at Columbia last night is there were riot police out on January 6th. There were none at Columbia. One's at the Capitol, one's at a university, lots of differences. That said, if these were students from far-right groups or Trump supporters who wanted to hang a MAGA flag at Hamilton Hall at Columbia, would the NYPD be called in?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we saw students break through a window and enter unlawfully. That's illegal. It's probably a misdemeanor class 1, but they shot Ashley Babbitt for doing the same thing. She committed a misdemeanor by going through a broken window, and the officer who shot her said that he was trying to protect the safety of those inside, and he was exempted. So it was a completely different. The model is not the reaction to January 6th. The model of these presidents and officials are using is the 2020 120 days of riot, mayhem, 35 dead, 1,500 police officers injured, $2 billion in damage, and 14,000 arrests that ended in nothing. They were all, for the most part, released. And that's what these protesters see. They see all these officials that talk, and they feel they talk loudly and carry a twig, and they're in blue states and blue cities, and they feel that deep down inside, the municipal authorities, the people, the faculty of the universities, and the presidents are sympathetic to them. That's what they feel. And it's hard to look at this and disagree with that.
Yeah, it's hard to argue
no action.
that. Yeah, it's hard to argue. If you just sort of think about the business model of these universities, right? Universities are billion-dollar businesses. Bring in an awful lot of money, have huge endowments. Washington University in St. Louis, University of Florida said, we're done with this. If you come on campus and you engage in these kinds of activities, you're going to be arrested and you're going to be thrown off campus with felony charges that are going to stick. That's happened. It's ended at Washington University in St. Louis. You've got Columbia, which I think rightfully you point out has made all these threats, and they're completely empty threats. But then there's Northwestern, my alma mater, that kids came on campus, they chanted things about ending Israel and hey, hey, ho, ho, Israel's got to go and the like. They were allowed then to camp on campus through June 1st. That the school now has to protect any protester who is outed for chanting and participating in these vile acts. And they have promised now to provide full tuition for 5 Palestinian undergraduates. What do you make of the business model here of each of these universities?
Well, they're very different because the former that you referenced are in red states. So people in Missouri or Florida, the elected governments of those states believe in law and order, and the people who are in those states tend to be a little bit more conservative than their counterparts in New York City and Chicago, which is back to my point. It sounds lunatic, but there is the implicit lesson here that these students are very canny people, and they feel that they've heard their entire lives, don't do this, deadline, 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 whether it's handing in papers or that's how the modern university operates in these places. So they have no credibility, the authorities, and the people who broke into Hamilton Hall think, well, they say a lot, but they won't do anything because this faculty is on our side and a lot of the administrators are on our side. And after all, we're in liberal New York City and the police have to be controlled by the mayor and he'll talk. But the chances that we're going to pay for the consequences of our actions are very slight.
I want to get your thought on this because it's an important point, but I have to warn you, I've only got about 60 seconds. There's all of this distinction being made between the students, quote unquote, and the outside agitators, as if the students have clean hands, but it's just the bad outside people, so don't blame the students. Is that a distinction without a difference?
Yeah, there's no difference. One thing about, very quickly, what we've learned is that all of the shibboleths of the past have been exposed. We were told you could be anti-Israel, but you weren't anti-Semitic. That's glided into one fuse. These people are anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel. We're said, the Gazans and the Gaza cause is different than Hamas. That's a shibboleth. We know now that these people are rooting not just Hamas, but my gosh, Iran and Hezbollah. So we're seeing the underbelly of this whole movement, and it's anti-Semitic, it's fascistic, and it's supporting autocratic governments and terrorist operatives in the Middle East. And they're masquerading as if they're idealists. They're very cynical young people, and the faculty are no more than prolonged adolescents. They've never been off campus. They went straight from PhD programs to their faculty billets with tenure, and can't expect much of them.
Yeah, the video we actually have up right now, I'm looking down at it, is of the faculty of Columbia surrounding the students and protecting them. Not much different than the young ladies described at GW. Victor Davis Hanson, as always, we're better for having your insights and thoughts, sir. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Yeah. While the college chaos ensues, the Biden administration has another major headache to deal with. These live pictures aren't helping. Evidently, that $61 billion in bipartisan aid to support Ukraine, well, it wasn't enough. Why Ukraine supporters already say they need even more. And a judge in New York fined Donald Trump $9,000 for violating a gag order. Did Trump win or the judge? Well, you might ask, when does it end? That's what some lawmakers are wondering after the latest bill for Ukraine funding passed. The U.S. has given Ukraine an additional $61 billion to help them in their fight against Vladimir Putin. That is more than the budget for the entire United States Marine Corps for this year. But some observers warn Ukraine's billions aren't enough. This is from Reuters. Ukraine's $61 billion lifeline is not enough. It's good for this year, but what about next? Reuters says that to get Ukraine through 2028, they would need $320 billion. That's more than we spend on the Navy and the Marine Corps. Lots more. Senator Ron Johnson sits on Foreign Relations, Budget, and Homeland Security Committees. Senator, you and I don't want to say we butted heads, but we had a couple of conversations about this. And you made exactly this point, and I kind of questioned it, and you are dead on that you give a mouse a cookie and they want a glass of milk.
Well, I won't rub it in, and quite honestly, I hope I'm wrong. I'm hoping the $61 billion will convince Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table and end this war. But I don't think it will. I mean, again, my point for well over a year is Vladimir Putin will not lose this war. They have 4 times the population. They can produce 4.5 times the 155 millimeter shells at a tenth of the price of the West. The average age of Ukrainian soldiers is 43 years. So when Chuck Schumer came out of the White House and said, this is simple. If Ukraine gets to 60 billion, they win. If they don't, they lose. I mean, again, he was lying through his teeth. He knew that wasn't true. And now the Biden administration is saying, well, I don't think this is going to quite do it. They're talking about a 10-year security pact. Again, I want this war to end. I'm concerned about the Ukrainian people. And if you're concerned about the Ukrainians, you ought to be concerned about what's happening to their country and how you probably don't want to use the Ukrainian people as cannon fodder in a proxy war between the West and Russia. And that is what this is basically devolved into. And it's apparently a proxy war that the administration and members of the Uniparty are happy to engage in because that's what it looks like right now.
All right, I just want to get President Biden on this real quick. Take a listen.
We need to move fast, and we are. Over 2 years, Russia has been responsible for a brutal campaign against Ukraine. Ukraine has regained over half the territory that Russia took from them in this invasion.
All right, so this is President Biden celebrating the $61 billion. Most wars end through negotiation. I think you make a very good point that the longer this goes on, the longer something spirals out of control. There's a risk of a major war on the doorstep of NATO that's happening right now. How does either a Republican or a Democratic president, how do you get Ukraine to the negotiating table? And how do you get a deal when we know that Vladimir Putin doesn't keep his?
Well, first of all, let's point out another reality that the Uniparty, the leaders won't point out. And that's the fact that we've really starved Ukraine of the types of weapons it would actually take to put pressure on Putin. And by the way, they're doing that for a good reason, because we don't want to risk a nuclear war. It's another thing people aren't talking about when they talk about appeasement like World War II. Well, the difference is, in this case, Russia has nuclear weapons. Hitler's Germany did not have that. So again, those are totally false comparisons. But the way you potentially bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table is demonstrate to him that this is going to be a bloody guerrilla type of warfare, and that they're not going to win. You provide Ukraine asymmetric weaponry, put at risk, for example, Russia's a Black Sea fleet, and they've done that to a certain extent. But again, you've got to wage the type of war that convinces Vladimir Putin he wants to end this thing. It's the only way. But again, I don't see any strategy for doing that. That's not the way they're talking. Right. They're talking about guaranteeing that Ukraine can come into NATO. That's not going to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table. It might have prevented him from invading had we said NATO membership is off the table for Ukraine. Recognizing that was a red line for Russia, but we weren't intelligent enough to do that. We allowed this invasion, quite honestly. We almost egged it on. We didn't do everything we could to prevent it. Now we're in this bloody stalemate, and I don't see a strategy from the Biden administration or, quite honestly, Democrats or Republican leadership in Congress to end this thing. Just provide more money. It's going to be putting money down a hole for the ordinary kids' future, and they'll be right back here again next year saying we've got to do it again. This is about freedom, about democracy. I want to end the war.
Well, Senator, I appreciate you not rubbing it in, a true gentleman, and willing to have an honest conversation about it. But you were right, dead on this. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, Donald Trump gets everybody to focus on him, no matter what, and not on his trials. How Trump got Whoopi Goldberg fired up.
Nobody in your family was hung. Nobody in your family was chased because of the color of their skin.
The judge in Trump's hush money case slapped the former president with $9,000 in fines after Trump repeatedly violated the court's gag order talking about witnesses and the like. More importantly, the judge sent Trump a message about what will happen if he does it again. Defendant is hereby warned that the court will not tolerate continued willful violations of its lawful orders, and if necessary and under appropriate circumstances, it will impose an incarceratory punishment. So once again, threatening jail time. Shannon Wu's here, former federal prosecutor, top official in the Clinton Justice Department. Good to see you.
See you.
Okay, help us understand this. To Trump, $9,000 is a golf bet.
Right.
And this is a judge who's demanding to be taken seriously. Trump over and over again defied the gag order. What message was the judge trying to send?
Well, the judge was actually constrained by New York State's rather convoluted system for contempt. The prosecution did not bring this as a criminal contempt case because they'd have to do a whole separate prosecution for that. This is the kind of contempt. It is called criminal contempt, but within the context of a criminal case. So the New York State laws said the judge can only impose $1,000 per violation or jail time if the $1,000 won't do it. So you hear the judge saying, okay, I'm going to say you violated it 9 times, $1,000 a pop, and I'm warning you that the next time is the potential for jail time.
All right, so the gag order is this. You can't talk about the case publicly, call the case political, criticize the judge and the DA. You can't speak about witnesses, court staff, or their family members. Something that Donald Trump, reasonable people can agree, has violated almost a dozen times. I think it was 9 or 10. Trump has said this: if this partisan hack wants to put me in the clink for speaking the obvious truth, I will gladly become a modern-day Nelson Mandela. It will be my great honor. He's sort of daring the judge to put him in jail. It doesn't seem like a dare the judge wants to take.
Yeah, I think this judge, like most judges, does not want to be the first judge to jail a former president, not over a full conviction, but over a contempt order, and he's afraid it's going to turn into a sideshow for that reason.
Afraid it might. You think about this from purely like the political optics for this judge, right? You've got a judge who is the king in his courtroom. Judges enjoy being the most powerful man in their courtroom, right? You've experienced that. Yeah. And then you've got a guy who used to be the most powerful man in the world. This is kind of like eye to eye in a weird way of total unequals, but now equals.
Right, yeah. And I think the difficulty for the judge is dealing with the fact that this is someone who has such a large platform. A normal defendant wouldn't have this kind of reach in what they're saying. Right. And normally they would be sort of like put in their box right away. I mean, I think a big issue I think the judges should remember, because I think the gag order should be punished much more severely, along the lines of Will Smith, keep your my trial to your mouth. Okay. But the issue is they're so concerned about the First Amendment, and even though I like the First Amendment, there's no repercussion in the criminal trial. It's not like Trump's going to get his conviction, if he's convicted, reversed because the gag order violated the First Amendment. So it's really up to the judge whether he really has the spine to say, okay, we've done this 30, 40 times at this point. We're not doing fines anymore.
Well, spine or ego, I guess are interchangeable. It's good to see you as always, sir. Thank you very much. 2016 taught us anything. It's that Trump knows how to master the news cycle. He showed it again today. His interview with Time magazine completely drowned out the talks of his trial. Here's what he said when a reporter asked him about anti-white racism and whether it's a bigger problem than anti-black racism in America. Quote, I think there is a lot to be said about that. If you look at the Biden administration, they're sort of against anybody depending on certain views. They're against Catholics. They're against a lot of different people. They actually don't even know what they're against, but they're against a lot. But no, I think there is a definite anti-white feeling in this country. Predictably, the ladies of The View lost it.
Nobody in your family was hung. Nobody in your family was chased because of the color of their skin. How dare you? There's no anti-white issue here. You are perpetrating anti-humanist issues here.
We've got to get a definition of anti-humanness. Maybe Eric Erickson can help. Host of The Eric Erickson Show, author of the country's best conservative newsletter, former official for President Bush's election and re-election. Eric, good to see you as always. Thank you. Anti-humanness, okay. If Donald Trump has ladies of the View making up words, is he now winning?
Yeah, listen, they don't have to take the bait, but they did. And there will be people sympathetic to what Donald Trump said. A lot of people aren't going to read Time magazine, but now it's getting disproportionate coverage. And when you have, for example, blue-collar white voters and Hispanic voters who increasingly identify the longer in their country as white voters, it drums up a level of interest in what he says that they don't have to do this. And yet time and time again, the left takes Donald Trump's bait. And in fact, what's so funny is there was actually an article today about Donald Trump taking the judge's bait on whether or not he's going to be held in contempt. And yet all of this stuff, the coverage of his case, it's just the left falling for Donald Trump's trap, and he gets maximum exposure out of it. And no one, by the way, talks about the allegations that came out of the trial.
Yeah, that's something that's been missing in coverage. One can argue that sort of known that Donald Trump paid off Stormy Daniels, but I guess neither here nor there. There is this feeling, perhaps, that Donald Trump now, especially with the latest polls, might win. And you're seeing this sort of these warnings, not unlike Whoopi Goldberg, but also Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, of what happens, the dire consequences if Donald Trump wins. Take a listen.
Depending on what happens in November, 7 months from right now, this time next year, I might not be sitting here. There might not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner or a free press. While our democracy doesn't exactly fall apart immediately without it, the real threat looms larger.
Not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner. The horror that could ensue if the tuxedoed class don't get to laugh at jokes from a not funny comedian. Does this resonate at all with Georgia swing voters that you're hanging out with?
No, it doesn't. It resonates with progressives. And I got to tell you, I'm writing about this for my newsletter tomorrow, that I am a little bit concerned that MSNBC, CNN, they lecture conservatives about their rhetoric, and words matter when conservatives say things. And I do kind of worry about the potential to provoke violence from the left. If the small number of people who watch MSNBC, you got a few crazy people in there, they really do think that the First Amendment's going to die, Donald Trump's going to become a dictator, he'll be an authoritarian who never leave office. These things are said on MSNBC. What crazy person is going to be provoked by this? If what the right says, what Donald Trump says is dangerous, the rule has to apply to the left, or it's a meaningless rule. And I don't know that they actually believe it, but there's some crazy person who will.
Well, hypocrisy in Washington is never hard to find. That said, we don't have to wonder if it will happen. It did happen, right, with the congressional baseball shooting. There was that attack.
Yeah, look, I mean, the last two, and this isn't hyperbole, the last two mass political assassination attempts in this country were Floyd Lee Corkins with Family Research Center and James Hodgkinson with the Congressional Republicans, both of whom we know factually were MSNBC viewers. There are people on the left who will be driven to try to take action. You show Donald Trump, you claim that he's
hold on. I mean, do we even have to say driven to take action? We just have to look at what's happening on college campuses, right? In terms of taking action and violence right now. How you have people chanting "I am Hamas"? That's pretty close, right?
Yeah, look, it is. They're taking over buildings. Now they want to be fed the privileged elite in this country and their spawning grounds on college campuses. This is playing with fire in that we've seen now a pattern of summer riots by the left, particularly when Republicans are on the rise. I don't think this helps the Democrats. And I do have to say, where is the president? He sends out press releases, but he hasn't actually forcefully on this. He should show some leadership, and he's not. That allows Donald Trump to show leadership.
If Donald Trump actually would seize the moment and not talk about anti-white racism, talk about the issues at hand, then yes, the opportunity is there. Eric, we'll read about it in show notes tomorrow. EricErickson.com. For that, I subscribe. You should too. President Biden appears caught on the protest, kind of flat-footed. He just hopes they'll go away. Eric said he hasn't talked about it. That's true. Is there any hope for Democrats now that they are fighting amongst themselves over what is and is not okay? Live pictures of Columbia there.
Stand Up to Cancer asked leading cancer researchers to speak about why they do their work.
Two words come to mind for me. One is responsibility. The other is purpose.
It's just so inspiring to do research that impacts human lives.
Stand Up to Cancer has been a critical partner in advancing research for cancer.
Cancer research saves lives.
So please, help us fight in this battle against cancer.
Be a part of the team that ends cancer at standuptocancer.org.
Smokey the Bear. Then you know why Smokey tells you when he sees you passing through. Remember, please be careful, it's the least that you can do. What you desire, don't play with matches, don't play with fire.
After 80 years of learning his wildfire prevention tips, Smokey Bear lives within us all. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com, and remember,
only you
can prevent wildfires.
Brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Over the years, you've brought them into your home. You were prescribed opioids after the C-section and after Dad's back injury. They helped when you were in pain, and you held on to them just in case. But did you know holding on to unused opioids puts your family at risk? Trouble with opioids can start at home with unused medicines such as pills, patches, and syrups. You can remove the risk and protect your family. Find out how at www.fda.gov/drug disposal.
Are you prepared for an emergency or disaster? Because it's not a matter of if, but when. Don't find yourself saying,
I'll trust water bottles and a flashlight to save the day, but I'll be proved wrong.
With a tornado approaching, I'll realize that I lack a wheelchair-accessible shelter.
When the floodwaters rise, I'll be up in the attic with 20 cans of beans. It's a recipe for disaster.
let's prepare so we all have a better story to tell. Get started at ready.gov/older-adults. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
You can't escape a traffic jam. Know what else you can't escape? Seasonal allergies. And you might think you can avoid that coffee stain until... Oh, really? You can't escape a lot of things in life, but you can escape prediabetes. Prediabetes captures 1 in 3 adults. There are usually no signs of prediabetes. In fact, most people don't even know they have it. But with early diagnosis, you can change the outcome and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Take action by taking the 1-minute risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. You might not be able to escape having this song stuck in your head, but you can escape prediabetes. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org today. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Thanks for listening to News Nation on the go. I'm Ashley Banfield, and this is America's source for engaging and unbiased news.
Pregnancy-related deaths in the U.S. are on the rise. The reason? Cardiovascular disease. And Black, Hispanic, and Native American women are the most at risk.
I never thought my pregnancy could cause heart failure. I experienced my first heart attack after the birth of my son.
But high blood pressure, gestational hypertension, and diabetes can put mom and baby at risk.
Visit goredforwomen.org/pregnancy to learn more, because my health is our health.
This summer, the Games will bring us together to celebrate our nation's athletes, their sacrifices, resilience, and unwavering passion. Because at the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, we believe athletes are defined by their journey, not the medals they win. And creating a safer stage for all levels of competition is our priority, from the practice fields in your town to the podium in Paris. Join the movement to end abuse at uscenterforsafesport.org.
At YMCA Summer Camp, kids find their why. Friendship and fun, a world of adventure beneath a golden sun. Running, laughing, full of wonder. Being themselves is second nature. Summer camp is where they begin to unlock the confidence that lies within. When kids find new passions, they find their why. Summer camp season starts soon. Learn more at ymca.org for a better us.
And on the move there, whether or not they actually go into the campus or not, we will all have to wait and find out. Obviously, the pictures you're seeing on the screen represent a big problem for Joe Biden. He's caught between what he wants to do in talking about these things and the political left and the political center and an ever closer November 5th. He desperately needs a ceasefire in Israel to take the pressure off his re-election bid. Live pictures of Tel Aviv, where the protests have terrified the Israelis. This is Jerusalem, pushing them not to make a deal despite pressure from Joe Biden. The Israelis are terrified about American support because of Joe Biden, because of the protests. And the protests also emboldens Hamas. They're the ones who took the hostages. Hamas only wants to keep the hostages longer and hold out for a better and better deal. After all, Hamas now has big support on American campuses. With that, we bring in Scott Trainer, our good friend and head of data science at our partners Decision Desk HQ, and Kurt Bardella. He's got a long resume, but it's not in the teleprompter, so I'm not reading it. NewsNation contributor, good to see you as always. Just in the past hour or so, Kurt, word from CBS News reporting that President Biden will offer asylum, citizenship path, on and on and on, to some Gazans to be resettled here in the United States. Does that help him enough with the left to offset how much it will anger the center or scare them?
No. I mean, here's the reality. There is nothing at this point that realistically President Biden can do that will appease the left, which is why I think he should stop trying to even do that. It's a fool's errand. No matter what you do, it's never going to be enough for them. So stop worrying about them. Trust the fact that by the time we get to November, they will come back home, because nothing has a more motivating impact on the left than Donald Trump's name on a ballot, in my opinion. Just do what makes the most sense. Move back to the middle here, because right now there are a ton of parents watching these shows that are watching what's happening on these campuses, and he's going to lose them all if their kids' graduations get derailed.
Yeah, we're going to keep the live pictures up just so we see what's happening, and hopefully get whoever it is standing in front of our camera out of the way. Polling on this, Scott, do you favor or oppose a permanent ceasefire in Gaza? Favor 70%, oppose 30%. Would you favor or oppose that ceasefire if it meant that Hamas was allowed to continue to hold hostages and Hamas were to continue to run Gaza? It flips now. Oppose 68%, favor 32%. How read in are Americans, for lack of a better term, on the nuances of these things?
Well, to answer your question, somewhat. They have opinion, right? There are a lot of issues where you might have 20 to 30% of the people say they don't even have an opinion on that. Clearly they do on this. The one number that's not on your screen that I'd like to point out, when we look at all polls, whether it's right-leaning polls, left-leaning polls, nonpartisan polls, our own polls we do here at NewsNation, this issue doesn't rank in the top 5. The number one issue is the thing we've always been talking about the last couple of years, inflation in the economy. So when the voters look at this, unless you're a very core Democratic voter, you're like, what are we talking about here?
Hold on. I understand when they look at Israel and Gaza and the nuance of how many hostages come home and everything else, although I think Americans held hostages still a thing, but I digress. But what about when they look at the pictures on the screen of the American flag being torn down at the University of North Carolina and kids breaking into Columbia University and riot police and this sense of disorder? I'll tell you, Joe Scarborough, not nearly as well-dressed as you are ever. But he does disagree. Take a listen.
The people that were burning down college campuses, the people that were taking over presidents' offices, those people are now on the faculty senate, trying to encourage these students to do the same. They helped elect Nixon. I guess they want to elect Donald Trump in 24. Good on you guys.
Okay. All right. So you're laughing because I think you agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is Chuck Schumer? Where is Kirsten Gillibrand? Where is Kathy Hochul trying to run a little bit of interference for the White House on this?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen a lot of political figures outside of the New York delegation airdrop into Columbia
Speaker
University.
Of the House. Yeah.
Where is the New York delegation? I mean, this is the most important thing happening in your state right now, and you need to be out there forcefully showing some leadership, because you cannot surrender that to other politicians who aren't even in your state or district. I don't understand what they're doing.
Is there polling on this that there's sort of this intense fear from the left? Is there enough polling to show that there really is a left flank that somebody like Chuck Schumer needs to be worried about, or Joe Biden needs to be worried about?
Yeah, where it is a salient issue is among the 18 to 35-year-old left-leaning, very
female.
Male, female, certainly that crowd. Certainly the crowd that watches all the TikTok videos. Certainly more people watch those TikTok videos than watch Joe Scarborough. A little more influential on that side. That's really where this is. It is very core to their base. It hurts their fundraising. And Joe Biden can't say the things he needs to say to shore that up without angering and allowing fundraising for Donald Trump and the right.
Now, you almost wonder if you could kind of just actually end this and you have 6 months to
That's exactly what he wants to happen. He wants to change the subject. That's what it is. Talk about something he wants to talk about, the economy.
Well, but he hasn't been able to talk for the past 2 days.
Well, and let's remember, though, in the not too distant future, college will be over for the year.
College will be over, and I'm going to take the last word. But Chicago is coming, and there's a little history of protests in Chicago during a DNC. Gentlemen, good to see both of you. Thank you very much. Live look at the campus of Columbia University as protests continue to grow. And the protesters are threatening graduation ceremonies Just what we were talking about. How do these end when we come back? Well, the protests continue and grow at Columbia. The protesters keep getting more and more, doing more and more. Thus, they will keep demanding more, keep tearing down flags, keep getting more aggressive. Doug writes to War Notes, it's sounding more and more like the protesters are calling for the overflow of the U.S. government. Aren't we putting Trump on trial for the same thing? Great point. The banner at Columbia reads Intifada, which means an armed uprising or revolution. Patty writes, on balance, is just another left-hating farce. No actual news of substance on the show. Every segment is either a yes man or an opponent that at Leland Vittert interrupts, argues with, yells at, over. Thanks for watching, Patty. We don't let anybody get away with talking points. Fandom writes on Twitter, Leland, how dare you call these people modern-day hippies? You totally offended my generation that was about peace and love, not hate and terror. You better rethink what you're saying, or you're going to lose more viewers. I used to think you were fair and unbiased. In Fandom, you make a great point. And yes, the anarchist terrorist wannabes on campuses are a lot different than peace-loving hippies of the 60s and 70s. To be fair, we were comparing 68 to 2024. Politically, there are a lot of comparisons. But you're right, we should have been more careful not to compare the hippies and the wannabe terrorists. Norma writes to War Notes, thank you for telling the truth, the whole truth. Your show is perfectly named, as you truly do bring the balance for which we are deeply grateful. Norma, thank you for watching. To be honest, I didn't come up with the name. Someone smarter than me did, but it reminds us of our mission every day. Yankee Doodle, if the money trail of these various protests is documented back to known terrorist groups, can these protesters be charged with anything? Material support to terrorism is a crime. Long before those kinds of charges. Perhaps just charge these folks with what they are doing. Felony breaking and entering, refusal to obey lawful orders, assault with hate crimes enhancements. There's a lot.